Hey everyone, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. Today is quite special. It's both Ash Wednesday and the first day of Ramadan. So it's in a way very poetic to some extent to have Anthony Aguilar with us here today on a day that symbolizes a lot about repentance and doing good out of a bad situation. Anthony is a retired lieutenant colonel who served in the U.S. military, and most recently he served in Gaza as part of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And after seeing the colossal, terrible situation there and the violations, he decided to speak up. And since that day, he's been leading one of the leading voices in exposing all those war crimes that were taking place and speaking up for Palestinian rights. And we're very appreciative to have him here with us today. The format will go as follows. Anthony will kick us off with a brief presentation based on his experience, and he will share that with us. Following that, we'll do a Q&A that will be moderated, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience. But before we start, I would like Pastor Tom to say a few words about the program. And I also want to be very thankful to Pastor Tom for always making this church a friendly space that's speaking up for justice and for people who are oppressed. So thank you very much. And we're grateful to be here on Ash Wednesday with you.
Thank you, Rizal. Hi, everybody. Everybody? As Rizal said, I'm Tom Harris. I'm the pastor here at First Presbyterian. Hello, welcome. We are a progressive Presbyterian church, which is just the progressive adjective basically means that although we are grounded in the Christian faith, we think that part of that means respecting and honoring all people's faith and traditions, that we don't think we're the only right way. It also means that we are continually called to stand up for justice and for social justice, especially for those who are oppressed. And that's, the advocacy and the work that we do on behalf of Palestine is exactly in line with those values. We're also LGBTQ affirming, we're trying to be anti-racist, standing up for the climate, all the good things. As Izam said, this is Ash Wednesday, so I did want to kind of give you a heads up. At the end of the presentation, I will give a very, very short, I promise, very short explanation of the ritual of the imposition of ashes, which is where you have ashes put on your forehead. And then I will offer that to anybody who wants it. I will be in the back of the church to offer it. Anybody who wants to come and talk to Colonel Aguilar can do that or visit with one another. So it's not imposed upon you, but it will be an offering to you at the end of this presentation. If you need bathrooms, you go out those double doors and to the left and right, and there are two gender neutral bathrooms. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Pastor Tom. Anthony, if you're ready, would love to go through your presentation and then we'll go from there.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I first want to start by saying thank you for welcoming me to your community, especially on this day of Lent, as we also begin the holy month of Ramadan. So Ramadan Mubarak and a holy Lent to all. So you see the title of my discussion today, the militarization of aid as a weapon of genocide. And often when we think of genocide, we think of bombs or shooting or killing or imprisonment or encampments. But starvation, as we're seeing in Gaza, is one of the primary weapons of genocide. And I witnessed it firsthand. And what I will share with you today are my firsthand experiences, facts-based. I'll also share my perspective on things, and that's certainly an opinion of mine, not necessarily a fact, but it's grounded in facts of what I saw with my own eyes and witnessed in Gaza. So to give everyone some background, the lens that I saw things through in Gaza. I served in the Army for 25 years. I'm West Point graduate. I served as a Green Beret. I have fought in every war with boots on the ground that the United States has fought in the last 25 years. Iraq, numerous times. Afghanistan, numerous times. Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Tajikistan, Southern Philippines, all throughout Central and Southeast Asia, Jordan, Israel, Gaza, Lebanon. So going into Gaza was not my first exposure to conflict and war. And I felt going in that nothing would necessarily shock or surprise me. But I was shocked and surprised and disgusted and sickened by what I saw. And that's coming from someone that has spent his entire adult life deployed and fighting in war. I joined the Army at 17. We had not yet started had been 9/11 had not happened yet. We were not in the global war on terror. And then a year after I joined, we were in the global war on terror, and I spent my entire career in that conflict. So going into Gaza, I went in with an experience of combat, laws of armed conflict, laws of land warfare, the protocols of the Geneva Convention that dictate war crimes. These are laws. These are facts-based values and principles. They're not opinions. They're not words that are just thrown around to say, well, that's a war crime or this is a war crime. What I describe as war crimes are based in law and what I witnessed. So I wanted to start with that. Context to going into Gaza. I just retired from the Army in March of 2025. So I've been out not even a year yet as of today. When I retired, I had no ambitions to go into government contracting or paramilitary contracting or any type of government work. I was not an activist. I wouldn't consider myself to be a humanitarian. I served in the military. I retired. I was looking forward to going to school in the fall and really not being involved in the government at all. May 13th, 2025, I got a phone call from a company called UG Solutions, which was a contract company that was working under an organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I had never heard of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and I had never heard of UG Solutions. Both of those companies stood up and became entities in February and March of 2025. When you look at the history of the first ceasefire of 2025, that ceasefire broke and ended end of March 2025. Back to hostilities, and at the same time, the UN and UNRWA were no longer able to go into Gaza to provide aid to Palestinians. Gaza Humanitarian Foundation becomes this entity. I had never heard of it. And then looking into it, I later discovered that it doesn't really exist as, it has no agency. There is no body to it. It's not a company. It's really just an idea that can become anything that anyone wants it to be. And in reality, what the GHF is an established entity for humanitarian aid that is a shadow company, if you will, of the CIA, operating in areas where humanitarian aid will be delivered under the guise of humanitarian aid to conduct intelligence operations. So why that's concerning, kind of a pretext to this, is that USAID, the United States mechanism for providing aid around the world, not just in our association with UNRWA in Gaza, but in Sudan, in Congo, in the Sahel, in Southeast Asia, and all over the world where the United States provides aid and assistance, that mechanism doesn't exist anymore. USAID no longer exists. So this mechanism of privatized aid is now the only solution for the United States to assist in humanitarian aid. And when aid becomes privatized, it becomes driven by profit, it loses its principles. The four principles of humanitarian aid or humanitarian assistance, it's more than just giving hungry people food. It's whole of society sustainment. And humanitarian assistance, humanitarian aid must always be independent. It must always be unilateral. It must always be neutral. And it must always address the actual need. So when aid is privatized, it's no longer neutral. It's working for whoever holds a contract. It's no longer independent because it doesn't operate based on the needs of the environment. It operates based on a contract. And it's no longer addressing the humanitarian need. It addresses what the limitations are of the contract. And that's exactly what unfolded in Gaza in my experience. So under the United Nations Works and Relief Agency, the UN agency that specifically supported the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian territories, in Gaza particularly, the United Nations, UNRWA, and over 100 non-government organizations, international, operated in Gaza, 400 community-based distribution sites. Every day, 400 sites, what you see in the blue dots. Every day, these sites operated in the entirety of Gaza, where the need was community-based support, vaccinations, medical assessments, meals, not just giving people food, but preparing meals and providing food. All of the things that a society needs. Imagine everything that you need in your entire daily life having to be provided to you by your neighbor. Imagine if you were locked in your home and you had no means to acquire anything on your own, to include your electricity, your water, your sewage. It all relied on your neighbor to bring it to you. So that's essentially what this is. To meet that need, simply to sustain life, not to thrive, simply to survive, the requirement for that was 600 trucks of aid going into Gaza every single day. Not once a week, not once a month, every day to sustain a 2.2 million population. May 13th, 2025, I received a phone call from UG Solutions. They said, we are going to deploy to Gaza to secure humanitarian aid under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We're specifically recruiting military, recently retired or have recently gotten out, to serve in our company because we need people of your expertise and experience to do this. And again, I had never heard of them, so I said, well, that's kind of a tall order. It's a dangerous mission. And I asked, well, how long do I have to think about it? And they said, this was on a Tuesday that they called me, and they said, well, we're leaving Thursday, so you've got a day. So I said, all right, well, then I need to think on it. So what I did was I talked to my family about it, but then I took out a notebook and I wrote down, what are the things that I know to be true? Because obviously there's so much going on. There's so much you hear in Western media. There's so much you hear in legacy media. There's so much you hear from different perspectives about what's going on. So I wanted to focus on, okay, what do I know to be true? That human beings are starving. There are human beings in Gaza that are starving. Women, children, mothers, fathers, families, human beings. No aid is going in. And third, well, this company that's been established, backed by the United States, to go into Gaza is going to deliver aid. So with those three facts, I decided that I would join and I would go. So by that Thursday, I'm on a plane to Virginia, and by that Friday, I'm in Tel Aviv. So this is the laydown of all those sites. And what's critical to see in this particular image is that if you see those sites that are squared, the black squares with the yellow outline, imagine all of those blue dots being gone, and those four are the only ones there. So under the new aid mechanism, that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was responsible for, it wasn't 400 sites, it's 400 sites ran 24/7 daily operations every day, gone. Now only 4 sites, and only one would be operated at a time. And instead of 600 trucks every day going in to Gaza, it went from 600 a day to none. Between March and May, none. And then we were going to start bringing in trucks, 12 trucks a day. And the contract, and again, this was not because of limitations. There's thousands of trucks lined up outside of the Rafah border. There's days of food lined up outside the Rafah border. And it's not a matter of if it can go in, it can. It's just a matter of who controls it. And the contract stipulated this: 4 sites, 1 site at a time, alternate the sites, only 12 trucks able to go in each day. And that was all that the contract relegated for fuel, for drivers, and no water. That was explicit in the contract, that the GHF in providing aid would not deliver any water. None at all, potable or non-potable. No water. Why? Because it was too heavy. In order to deliver the required water, you would have to have more trucks. You would have to have fewer food shipments going in order to make more for water, because you can't put as much water on a truck as you can food because of the sheer amount of weight. And that would have cut into the profit. No water. Palestinians, they can figure it out themselves. Mind you, at this time, there was only one water facility operating in the entirety of Gaza, and that was in the south, in the Marag corridor, where no Palestinians were living anymore because it had all been destroyed. And I'll show you pictures of that when I went into Rafah. And it really opened my eyes to that, yeah, this idea of weaponized aid. Well, that's exactly what this is. It's under a contract. And in this conflict, there are 2 sides. And Israel controlled the contract. So the written contract between the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the client, being the government of Israel, dictated everything that would go in and what wouldn't go in to Gaza. These are those distribution sites. So the 4 sites that I showed you, only one operating at a time, they were all built generally the same in terms of their established layout. And on the morning of the 24th of May, before we went into Gaza to do a reconnaissance of the sites, to kind of get an idea of how the sites were laid out, the first thing that struck me as odd is like, oh, the sites are already built. Well, I thought that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that we would be operating unilaterally, independently, and neutrally. So I thought we would build the sites. Nope, they were already built. And when I looked at the sites, as soon as I looked at the overhead imagery of this site, as a 25-year infantry officer and as a Green Beret, the first thing that jumped out to my head was, this is right out of military doctrine as an engagement area. This is where you would doctrinally plan to kill your opponent. One way in, one way out, converging routes, the entire site surrounded in razor wire. My first indication that there would be war crimes, that according to the Geneva Convention, you cannot surround or have obstacles around areas that are supposed to provide aid to non-combatants with razor wire. It's actually explicit in the Geneva Convention. It's a reason for that. So seeing these sites, I thought, surely this cannot be how we're going to distribute aid to human beings that need food. And you'll notice these corrals, for lack of a better term, those stretched a kilometer outside of the site. So you can imagine 4 chutes a kilometer long of these cages, thousands of people being forced into them until the site would open each day. It was a recipe for disaster. And it wasn't planned accidentally. It wasn't planned not understanding or acknowledging the implications. A site doesn't get built that way by accident. It's a design. So on the 24th of May, we went into Gaza to do this reconnaissance. These are pictures that I took. As we go into Rafah, this is you enter into Rafah through the Karim Shalom crossing. And as you drive down the Philadelphia corridor, which is the road that borders Egypt, and you're heading towards the coast, that entire area in the southern part of Gaza is Rafah. You have Tel Al Sultan, where Rachel Corrie was killed in 2003. You have Abu Bakr and the eastern part of Rafah, which kind of comes south of where Khan Yunis dips down in the south from central Gaza. And these pictures, that is the totality of Rafah. That wasn't one street or one block. That's all of Rafah gone. 500,000 people lived there, and Rafah's gone. And combat operations were still ongoing as we started distribution. And when we went in there that day, as we're driving through, we would stop along the way because the IDF were escorting us and they were conducting aerial bombardment. So we'd have to wait to continue on until the bombing was done. And as we're sitting there and waiting, you can hear in the rubble, these buildings haven't been that way for years. This is fresh destruction. You could hear Palestinians crying from the rubble, trapped, dying, never to be rescued. Down here in that bottom picture, that is the Markava Mark IV tank, the Israeli main battle tank. And outside of each distribution site was stationed an IDF tank company. So here you have a distribution site that's built with the same entrance to come in as the same way to go out, with only 4 sites, one at a time, supposed to feed 2.1 to 2.2 million people, if that was the considered population at the time. It's much lower than that. No water. The Palestinians in reaching these sites couldn't drive there. It wasn't like getting in your car and going to the grocery store. You had to walk. And depending on where you lived, because no Palestinians lived south of the Marag corridor, if you lived in Khan Yunis, the site was 10 kilometers away from you. So you'd have to walk. And when you leave your home to go to one of these sites, you never get to go back home. 1, you may not survive. 2, as the IDF would clear out a section for those to come south to get food, their neighborhood would then be destroyed. It was a coordinated operation. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. Operation Gideon's Chariots is the operation that was being conducted at the time. Every day, we had to coordinate with the IDF. They would dictate which site would be opened, how long it would be open for, how much food we would be providing, how long it would be open. And at most, typically, the site was only open for about 8 minutes. It wasn't an accident. It was pre-planned each day. And as it was pre-planned, as the sun would rise in the morning and thousands of Palestinians would be rushing to these sites to get food, behind them, you can see the bombs dropping and their neighborhood being wiped out. So that puts a family in the position of, do I starve to death? Or do I leave my home knowing I'll never come back? So as they came south, they would then be sent to one of the UN encampments. You had the coastal encampment, which you see now on the news where it's being battered by the winter weather, right on the beach. That's the Mawasi camp. You have the Rafah camp, which was further south, but it had to be moved because the Israelis bombed it. That's now near Nasser Hospital, which was struck in August. And then the Khan Yunis camp. And those encampments are no longer serviced or supported by the United Nations. And recently, 37 more agencies have been banned from going into Gaza, to include MSF, or Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. Gaza is the only place on the planet that Doctors Without Borders has been banned from operating. Again, that's not an opinion, that's a fact. So in these UN encampments where internally displaced persons, Palestinians, are living, there's no services. There's no electricity. There's no prime water, open sewage, nothing. And nothing's going in. And under this privatized aid, it wasn't contracted to service as aid. It was contracted to serve as a shaping operation of the overall military operation, of the offensive, to displace. And again, the forced displacement of a civilian population is a violation of the Geneva Convention. It's verbatim. And I say these things, and some people may say, well, maybe Israel's not signatory to it. They are. The fourth protocol of the Geneva Convention was signed in 1952, and Israel is a signatory to it, as is the United States. It applies. It's law. So at these sites every day, I want to kind of paint the picture of my first arrival into Israel, just to give context that I didn't take on this job and I didn't go into Gaza as an activist or someone looking to prove a point or with an opinion to say, oh, I'm gonna show everybody what this is. From my exposure to Western media and my experience in the military, prior to going there, prior to getting off the plane, if we were to get off the plane and they were to put us into two lines, who's pro-Israel, who's pro-Palestinian, I would have gone into the pro-Israel line. They're our ally. We need them. They're the most moral army in the world. We're here to work with them. This is going to be great. That's what I thought. So I went into this not with a point to prove. And yet what I saw was so overwhelmingly evil that it broke me mentally, emotionally. There is not a night that passes that I don't think about these children dying in the rubble or the feral dogs eating human flesh. And that's the reality on the ground. The day we arrived in Israel, an officer from the Coordinating Office of the Government Activities in the Territories, it's called COGAT. It's a department underneath the Ministry of Defense, or their military, met us at the airport. And as we were going to our hotel, we stopped at this place called Sterdot. And I welcome anybody to Google this, look it up. There's documentaries about it. Sderot is just outside of the Gaza Strip in Israel on a large hill that overlooks the valley. And when standing on Sderot on a clear day, you can see all of Gaza. You can see all the way to the coast. You can see all the way to the towers in the Egyptian border. You can see all of it. Because Gaza, where the Gaza plain is a valley as it comes down into the Mediterranean. And on this hilltop in Sderot, the Israeli government has put in vending machines, picnic tables, television screens that have live feed to the cameras in Gaza. The binoculars that you would see on top of the Empire State Building, where you put a quarter in, you can look at the city there, where you can go and take a picture of bombing in the background and celebrate what's happening. And it's encouraged. And in fact, when US congressmen and women take CODELs or congressional delegation trips to Israel, that's where they take them. Every picture you see of members of Congress going to Israel where they have their picture taken with the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Defense, is at Sderot. That's a fact. And as we're standing there watching this, the Israeli officer explained to us, this is Gaza. He's standing there talking to us. This is Gaza. This is where you're all going to be operating. And soon this will all be under our control. And in hearing that, I'm like, I guess I missed the memo. I thought we were here to deliver aid and food and be a neutral party in this. What do you mean this will all be under your control? And then when a few days later, as I go into Gaza for the first time, I see exactly what they meant. There's nothing left. The statistics right now are 550 million tons of rubble. If we started right now today clearing the rubble, it would take until 2050 before any rebuilding can actually begin. It is not only a genocide, it is an ecocide. This is an agrarian-based society. Beasts of burden have all been wiped out. Crops have been destroyed. The amount of weapons and bombs that have been dropped in here will make it unplantable for decades. The United States, us, our tax dollars, provide every bomb, every mortar, every tank round, every artillery round, and every bullet shot, fired, or dropped in Gaza. It comes from us. Period. That's a fact. 2,000-pound thermobaric bombs. It's called the Mark 18. Personal experience with them. We provide those. We're the only ones that make them in the world. And for every one of those bombs that drops from a $35 million aircraft, you have a $50,000 bomb being dropped on a Palestinian that makes less than $1 a day. And we're providing that, our tax dollars, to the tune of billions. And that should concern all of us, because it's not stopping anytime soon. And let's see, you're left here. This was at distribution site number 3 on the 28th of May, 2025. The distribution site 3 was in the southern edge of Khan Yunis, right on the Marag corridor. And when I say the Marag corridor, you had the Netzarim corridor, which is in the north, that cut off Gaza City and Beit Hanun from the rest of Gaza. Nobody can go in or out. Then you had central Gaza. You had the Marag corridor that cut off the south from the central. So basically, central Gaza was isolated, and they were pushing everybody south. And no one in Gaza City could go anywhere, completely cut off. So at this site on that day, the typical operation, we would drive the trucks in. The pallets would get pushed off the truck into piles. We'd pull the trucks out. And then the IDF would tell us when they were going to release the holding line of Palestinians. We were told prior to going in, they're all Hamas. They all want to kill you. They cannot be trusted. And they'll take every opportunity to kill you or kidnap you to make a statement, to use an American as a bartering chip. And that's the mentality we went in thinking. And on the 26th of May, at site number 1, the IDF couldn't hold the line. 34,000 Palestinians. Where I was standing, I couldn't see to the horizon because there was a berm in front of me. But when the crowd released at about 5:35 in the morning, the ground shook. The ground shook from where I was standing, from people coming. And when 34,000 people, there were only 20 of us, 20 contractors, that's it. 34,000 Palestinians rushed onto this site to get whatever food they could. Guess how many of them were armed? 0. Guess how many of them kidnapped, threatened, assaulted us? 0. I had a gentleman come up so overjoyed that there was food, that a chance at food, that he grabbed my cheeks and he kissed me and he said, thank you, America. I was walking back because as more came onto the site, I was walking backwards and I tripped. And it was a Palestinian man that helped me up. Not one person armed. Not one person said they hated me. No one was kidnapped. If there's 34,000 people against 20, you can kidnap everybody. It was entirely safe. So on this particular day, on the 28th, the crowd had come onto the site. The food was gone. I told you the sites typically were open from about 8 minutes was average. On this day, the site was open for 6 minutes and 37 seconds. I timed it. Because when we opened the site, rush of thousands, and the food was gone before you can blink an eye. There was no distribution. It was a free-for-all. And typically, who's left at the end are the disabled, young children, or the weak, the most vulnerable of the population. And on this day, on the 28th of May, at site number 3, there were children who were there after the crowd left picking up scraps, just scraps. Remember, we're not giving them meals. We're not giving them a cooked meal. We're not even giving them food they can eat. We're giving them a bag of rice, a bag of fava beans, a bag of dried pasta, and as I said earlier, no water. How do you prepare it? And at the end, children would come through to grab up the cardboard to take with them to use for either for fire or if they could get a big enough piece of cardboard for shelter. Some of the food would come on these wooden pallets and they'd break them down so they had firewood. And this young boy, his name was Amir, he's standing in the crowd and he walks up towards us. Myself and the other contractor that's standing there next to me, that's the top right picture, that's my hand. The middle picture, that's the contractor next to me. But this young boy, as he comes walking up, he didn't come up to us and complain or beg for more food or ask, why isn't there more food? He came up and he thanked us. In this boy's hands, he has a bag of dried rice, half a bag of flour, and some other scraps of beans that he picked up off the ground. How is he going to prepare and eat that? His father was killed in an airstrike in Khan Yunis. When they were evacuated, he was separated from his mother. He was living in the UN encampment in Khan Yunis, which was close to Site 3. And on his way that day, 8 kilometers through minefields, through that picture that I showed you, can you imagine look at that bottom right picture. Can you imagine walking through that as an 8-year-old child barefoot? Tanks, artillery, minefield, snipers. And he thanked us. The contractor there, this young boy, he kissed his hand and he said, "Thank you." And we were led to believe that all Palestinians are Hamas. It's not true. And as this child left, the IDF on the radio said, everybody has to leave the site now. We would typically allow the children to pick up scraps. We were told they have to leave now because they were going to bring in, they were going to do a bombing run along the Marag corridor. And it was heavy. It was heavy. And so we're like, you need to leave, you need to leave. And as he's walking away towards that gate, and I see him walking away with no shoes, his little pants held up with a rope, barely fit. God knows the last time he ate a meal or had water, emaciated. And the last words he said to us were, "Thank you." And as he walked away, I thought to myself in my head, these children won't survive this war. The most vulnerable of this population will suffer the most. And it's not needed. And as he left the site that day, the IDF began shooting into the crowd and he died. You know, I rephrase that. He didn't die. He was killed. He was killed. And then celebrated, funeral, buried in the rites of the Muslim faith? No. Bulldozed into a shallow pit, along with hundreds of others. And that wasn't the only one. Thousands have met that fate. Not Hamas, not armed, not terrorists. Muslims and Christians that live in Gaza. As he walked out that gate and I went up onto the berm, because I heard the machine guns start opening up, start firing. And I ran on top of the berm to take cover to see what was happening. And as I saw dead Palestinians, some that were wounded and trying to get away, some were dragging others, and others that were dead, I heard a voice that was clear as the voice that I'm speaking now, that said, "Do not forget what you've seen here. Do not forget." And I haven't and I won't. The picture on the far right side, this young girl's name is Basma. This was at distribution site number 4, which was further north near the Netzarim corridor. Distribution site number 4 was shut down about 2 weeks into operations because the IDF occupied it as a staging base for artillery to initiate Operation Gideon's Chariots 2, which was the offensive into Gaza City, which started back in August. On the site that day, same as before, the people that are left at the end to get scraps are typically children and the disabled, elderly. And this young girl came up to us and she was asking, "Well, is there more food?" I'm like, "No, there's no more food." And she said, "Well, I came yesterday and there wasn't any." And there's no food today. I said, well, you just have to come back tomorrow. And I had this box. I bought these cookies to give to some of the children so they had something to eat. And so I gave her this package of cookies and I said, take these home with you. And she puts down her little purple backpack and she rips open the package and she starts giving them to the other children and to the women that are standing there and the other little girl, and starts giving it. And the children come and she's handing it out to them. And she was like, give me another one. I had a box of these cookies. So I hand her another one. She rips it open and she's handing them out. Another one. She's handing them out. And she was like, well, if you're not going to feed my people, then I will. And she went through all of them. And the last package I had left, I said to her, I said, take this home. Take this with you. Take this home. And the IDF called on the radio and said that we're shutting down the site. Everyone has to leave. And as people were leaving, I said to her, you have to go home now. You have to go home. And I gave her this package of cookies. And you see her purple backpack. She's putting the cookies in the backpack. And as I'm telling her, go home, you have to go home, she pulls out a photo. And she shows it to me. And she says, this is my home. Right here where we're standing. This is where my home was. That pile over there is the mosque I went to. That pile over there is the school I attended. That pile over there is the playground we used to play on. And my home, my neighborhood was right here. I said, I'm sorry. I mean, what do you say to that? I'm sorry. And she looked me right in the face and she said, you go home. So I did. A few days later, I resigned. I tell these two stories to highlight I don't speak for Palestinians. I speak with Palestinians. Humanity. This is not about religion or politics or whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or wherever you may be in the political spectrum. This is humanity. Humanity. I have fought war, and I understand the impact and the destruction of war. The death toll in Gaza from the destruction is over 500,000. We have been providing to Israel 2,000-pound joint deployed aerial munition, JDAMs, into Gaza for years. And especially over the last 2 years, over 100,000 of these 2,000-pound bombs have been dropped. Just in Rafah, the cries of the voices of the children and the mothers and the fathers from this rubble. Multiply that by 100,000. There are hundreds of thousands buried underneath the rubble that will never be found. The thermobaric bombs that we provide to Israel, if one of those were to drop in the center of this church right now, all of us there would not even exist at the atomic level. Vapor. And now those are the bombs that we're providing. Those have killed thousands. It is a genocide. It is an ecocide. It is an infanticide. So shortly after the 8th of June, when I saw Boston at that site, I resigned a couple days later with what I had witnessed heavy on my heart and on my mind, thinking that this can be fixed. Like this is not like this is a result of poor planning, poor execution. We can fix this. And so I submitted this 15-page report to the boss, to the leadership, how we can fix everything. They're like, oh, that's nice, in the trash. Oh, okay. And then I learned that out of the 300 contractors that they hired, 282 of them were directly recruited from the Infidels Motorcycle Club. Remember I told you how I was called on a Tuesday and I left on a Thursday? I thought, how did they get 300 people in a day? Well, they didn't. They hired 282 of them months ahead. Back in like March, they were already ready to go. And the requirement was for 300, and they were short 18. I was one of those that got called up as a last-minute fill. 282 of them directly recruited from the Infidels Motorcycle Club. And I'm not making this up. But the guy you see in the right corner, he is the U.S. national president of the Infidels Motorcycle Club. It's a gang. It's a gang that call themselves the Infidels. Why? Because they see themselves as the modern day Christian crusaders. You see the emblem, infidels with the Crusaders' cross, skull with the Jerusalem cross. This individual here, the national president with the infidels tattoo, and on his chest is 1095. 1095 is the year that Pope Urban I directed the first crusades to the Holy Land with one simple charge: eliminate all Muslims from the earth. That's their charter as a club. The Infidels Motorcycle Club, in their charter, have two goals: to fight global jihad and to eliminate all Muslims from the earth. And the contract specifically hired this organization to fill its ranks, to deliver aid into Gaza. That would be like someone hiring the KKK to deliver food in the Congo. It's absurd, unless the intent is destruction. Because as I saw these things unfold, and I would go to this the boss here and show him video, like, what is going on? They thought it was good. They thought it was the right thing to do. They were there. It was a pilgrimage. It was a crusade. And as these things unfolded, and I'm seeing all these pieces come together, finally, 10th of June, I was taken with the IDF leadership from COGAT, the organization that I'd mentioned, Coordinating Office for the Governance Activities in the Territories, to the Southern Command headquarters in Beersheba. Beersheba is an Israeli city in the Negev desert. Goes back to the biblical times, the seventh well of Abraham. And while we're in this headquarters, we were coordinating with the IDF on transferring site number 4 over to an Israeli unit to occupy, because we had to get all of our stuff off. And in this headquarters, imagine, if you will, if you went into your city hall and you see a map on the wall of the district or the county. Similar to that, map of Gaza, and next to it, this. And I'm just looking at this and I'm like, what is this? Like, this is, it's like, man, they're really kind of putting the cart before the horse here on this rebuilding of Gaza. And as I looked, Project Sunrise is what it's called, and this is not a conspiracy theory, this is not some deep state, you can look it up. It's Project Sunrise. It is part of the US 20-point peace plan. It is part of UN Resolution 2803 that was adopted by the UN Security Council as the peace plan that we're now pursuing. This is part of it. If you watch the news and you heard of the peace board to buy into this peace board, it's $1 billion buy-in. Why? Because this is a $112 billion project in phase 1 alpha. Where are they starting? In Rafah. Huh. That's why we put all the distribution sites in Rafah. It wasn't about distribution. It's about land ownership. Possession is 9/10 of the law. GHF still owns that land. So as I'm looking at this and I'm seeing this, I was like, did y'all know about this? I was like, is this known? Oh yeah, we knew about it. Maybe no, yeah, we knew about it. This is horrible. And as I'm just kind of looking at this thing on this big map on the wall, what caught me like a punch in the face, this was planned in 2021. It's a fact. Project Sunrise was planned in coordination with the Boston Consulting Group and the Ministry of Defense and the US State Department in 2021. So is it all about October 7th, 2023? Good question to ask. 2021 plans for a resort, a Riviera, golf courses, Trump Resort, Elon Musk Technical Park, oil industry. 2019, in Rafah, huge amounts of natural gas discovered. And then right off the coast, that if the Palestinian state existed as a sovereign state, would be their territorial water. Accessible oil right off the coast that would make OPEC look like a drop in the bucket. So what is it about? How did we have this plan in 2021? So once I saw that and I was looking at how all these things came together, it shattered my paradigm of this is a just war. This is self-defense. The Israeli army is a moral army. It's not. But what's deeper concerning than that, is that the United States government is knowingly involved, complicit, directly. We have legislation in Congress to stop providing offensive munitions. We have legislation in Congress to allow the unrestricted aid to go into Gaza. Right now, we think, okay, ceasefire. There's no ceasefire. Just today, they're dropping 2,000-pound bombs. There's not a ceasefire. Aid is still not going in. Remember I told you the minimum requirement is 600 trucks? Over the last month, between January 18th and February 18th, I track this daily. There's only been a total of 933 trucks that went in over 30 days. Food is being used as a weapon. The weaponization of aid. Right outside the Egyptian border, thousands of trucks with containerized housing units. These are pre-built homes. They're like the size of a 40-foot shipping container. Thousands of them. And all you got to do is set them in and they're ready to go. While a mile away on the other side of the border, human beings freeze to death, hypothermia, exposure. And there's housing units sitting right across the border that we paid for. We bought those. The food that sits on the other side of the border, it's plenty. And months ago, the United Nations released the report that was investigated by not only Israeli military intelligence, but US intelligence and Western nation intelligence, that UNRWA was not infiltrated by Hamas. They were doing their job. So what this showed me, in that opening up my eyes to this, it caused me to reflect on my entire 25 years of service and ask myself hard questions. Why were we in Iraq? Why are we still in Iraq? You all know that we have upwards of 3,000 troops still stationed in Iraq. With the buildup going on over this week, we're going to have about 6,000 by the end of the month. Syria, we still have about 1,500 US soldiers in Syria. Afghanistan. So, seeing this with my own eyes, Gaza is the front line of humanity. And on that front line of humanity is the front line of evil, of everything we detest in our lives. It isn't about religion or self-defense. It's about money, power, zealots, and unless we as a nation stand up for change, it's not going to change. And so every day I wake up with that voice in the back of my head. Don't forget what you saw here. Don't forget. And every once in a while, when I start to feel discouraged about no one's listening or this seems so hard, that voice in the back of my head with, you go home. Because Palestinians don't have a choice. And soon the choice that they're going to be offered, well, you can just leave. You can just leave. And that's something the world cannot stand for. It is the front line of humanity. It represents everything that we as a human race hold valuable. But furthermore, to add to that, as Americans, the Department of Homeland Security has a $169 billion contract through the Binational Industrial Research and Development Program. It's outlined in the DHS strategy. Anyone can find it on the DHS website. Look it up. And out of that $169 billion, that is specifically for ICE to train with the IDF in Israel. I've seen the base. It exists. That's a real thing. They train at the National Urban Training Center in Beersheba. And for IDF agents to train in the United States in Georgia, Cobb City, just outside of Atlanta. It's a real thing. I've been there. What you see Palestinians endure, shoot first, ask questions later. Shoot and shoot to kill. Abuse. It is no coincidence that you are seeing that here. The technology, Palantir, each one of our distribution sites, the cameras, why would you need biometric data collection cameras, facial recognition software in a distribution site for food? Why? Well, they had it. Palantir. Palantir Gotham is the software. It's the same software that we're using, that ICE is now using here. So the tactics of oppression that we export always make their way back home. When the chickens come home to roost, the imperial boomerang, any name you want to call it, it is coming back. And if we don't stand for humanity, what I say to everyone that I talk to, take it from someone that has seen societies collapse. I was in Afghanistan in the last days before we withdrew and saw Afghanistan go from Taliban control to Northern Alliance control to this government of the Islamic State of the Republic of Afghanistan propped up by Western nations to total failure and falling apart and the Taliban taking back over. It's there through all of it. I know the indicators of society collapsing. If we don't make a stand against this, we are next. Take it from someone that served this country for 25 years. We are next if we don't stand up against this. Thank you.
Palestine for a couple of years, and in that short time, I've never heard a more clear and graphic and concise and convicting testimony of what's going on there. And thank you for that. It was incredible. In our tradition, the Christian tradition, we call that witnessing. We call that testimony. It doesn't have to be about what you believe about Jesus. It can be the truth that you see among those who are hurting most in the world. There's going to be question and answer and interview, but I promised that I would offer the imposition of ashes at 7:15 for anybody who just wanted that. And so I just want to give you a quick overview. It's Ash Wednesday. It's the day that begins Lent, where we look toward Good Friday, where Jesus was tortured and executed by the state, not unlike what's happening to the Palestinians. And we look toward Easter Sunday, when we believe that life rises despite anything that the state can do to try to kill us. The imposition of ashes is a tradition that can be received by anybody, whether you're Christian or not. It has three meanings. One is it is a sign. You put ashes on your forehead as a sign of grief. It's a sign of grieving. When Job lost everything, he sat in ashes and put ashes on his head. And I think after what we've heard, we can all relate to grieving. It's a sign of our own mortality, that we're all going to die. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. And it's a sign of penitence. And that, I think, is especially meaningful tonight after what we've heard. Because, as Colonel Aguilar said, we're all paying for this. Whether we hate it, whether every fiber of our being hates it, our tax dollars are paying for it. And so we are complicit too. And for that, we need penitence. At least. The ashes that I will be offering have gold glitter in them. The reason for that is a tradition that emerged out of the queer Christian community, where queer Christians wanted to have the spiritual practice of penitence, but not for who they were, right? They wanted to say, it's not about shame for who I am, It's about acknowledging that I don't always live up to the values that I hold. And so they came up with this idea of putting glitter in. And so that's going to be in there. And I'll just read you a quick quote to connect with the blessing that I'll offer if you come up. This is from Carl Sagan. The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our apple pies were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. So if you'd like to receive ashes, whether you want a cross or a smudge, if you're like, don't put a cross on me, I can put a smudge on you instead. And the blessing will be, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. You are made out of stars, so let your light shine.
Thank you, Pastor Tony. Whew. Anthony, first, I want to say as a Palestinian, thank you for seeing Palestinians as human. I think we have had at the core of all of the struggles we have gone through as people in the last 100 years, a very deep dehumanization process taking place from people coming from the Western side of the world. And some of what you said really stuck with me, which is that you're speaking with Palestinians, not for them. You were making that a point, and I think that really hit home, because we have, for the longest time, have not been able to have our voice represent what we say. We've had people who want to speak for us, whether they're fellow Arabs from neighboring countries, whether it's Western countries or what have you. But the Palestinian voice was always looked at or heard last, or even if at all. So being able to hear you just say that right out of the gates is something that's very, very meaningful and very important. So I'm deeply appreciative that you are having that lens coming into this. My first couple of questions were going to be around the dehumanization.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping that you can maybe take us behind the scenes of what you were hearing, maybe not from the infidel collective, whatever that is called, but from others who are not looking at Palestinians as human due to whatever past experiences or whatever they've been told before they actually have met any of them. What is in the background that makes it so that people don't look at people in Western Asia, Northern Africa, or in Global South as human? Can you help us see behind the curtain? What else were you hearing for those 25 years that you were in the military?
Well, when it came to Iraq, it was the big bad wolf of Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction, and we have to save the world. And then when there was no weapons of mass destruction, it was, well, if we don't fight them here, they're going to fight us at home. And then it was the global war on terror that never has an end. In Afghanistan, the Taliban harbored Al-Qaeda. Not true. And yet, after 21 years in Afghanistan, at the tune of about $10 billion a year, and ask yourself, we have a national debt of about 38 trillion. And for 20 years, we fought a war, just one. Afghanistan alone was costing us 10 billion a year. And I was in Afghanistan when we left. I was a battalion commander in the 82nd Airborne Division, or the 18th Airborne Corps, when we deployed a headquarters to withdraw out of Afghanistan from Hamid Karzai International Airport. Days before Abbey Gate bombing killed American service members. And as we were leaving, I grew up always thinking, America, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We do the right thing, always. And there we are on the runway of Hamid Karzai International Airport, unable to leave because ISIS Khorasan, or ISIS-K, had moved into the city, and they're both an enemy of the Taliban and the US. And had we tried to leave, they would have shot our C-17 out of the air, and that would have been a total embarrassment for the United States government. So you know who the United States government, from the president, the SecDef, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the commander of the 18th Airborne Corps, Central Command's commander, on a video screen, all having to negotiate with? Taliban. We left Afghanistan under a negotiated agreement with the Taliban. And you know what they asked? 1, recognize us. 2, all that money that you're taking out of the embassy, leave it. And all of these weapons and this equipment, leave it. We didn't leave it there because we couldn't get it out. We left it there because we negotiated with the Taliban. So, dehumanization is what I think the most lethal part of warfare, because it leads one to believe that, well, your life is less important than mine. In the days of Vietnam, when the American grunts, what were they told about the Vietnamese? Gooks, right? When I deployed to Afghanistan, to Iraq, embedded in the US Army basic training, ragheads. To this day, the United States military, in their pop-up targets to shoot, still use the picture of a terrorist in a keffiyeh. It's dehumanization based on ignorance and racism and bigotry. That when you see the truth of things, you realize that's not true. Again, in Gaza, unless I saw the 110,000 Palestinians that didn't have weapons, I saw not one armed Palestinian. None. They didn't throw a rock at me. They didn't curse at me. In fact, when a UG Solutions contractor threw a stun grenade that killed a woman and cut my arm open, the man that came to help me and took off his keffiyeh and wrapped it around my arm was a Palestinian man, not an American contractor. And I think we're seeing those same tactics of the dehumanization, the ignorance sewn into what we're doing in Venezuela, and it's a big part of it. I think it's a big part of what we're getting ready to do in Iran. By Friday, US time, 2 or 3 in the morning, Iran, we will be at war. We've already crossed that line. Why? For what? Oil, Israel, money, influence, power. I mean, where does it end? But a lot of it is driven by dehumanization. It's much harder to kill someone when you see them as a human, when you see them as valued. I mean, it's a reason why that, that aspect of dehumanization is programmed into military training. Because in those moments of combat, you can't hesitate to see the other as anything but the enemy. But when that carries into seeing the entire population as such, or even seeing anyone as such in the first place. As a young second lieutenant, butter bar, as they say, right out of West Point, I deployed my infantry platoon to combat. I was in Fallujah. And I had this image of big, bad terrorists that were going to fight. The enemy wanted to kill us. And if we didn't fight them here, they were going to fight us back home in the US and protect my family. And I always thought about this glorified version of being in the infantry, the American flag waving, Lee Greenwood singing, in the background. And within my first few days of being in Fallujah, I was shot. And bad. And my radio telephone operator, my RTO was killed. And my interpreter, an Iraqi, grabbed me and pulled me into this courtyard. And the person that had been shooting at us was hit with gunfire from an Apache, and it took his legs off. And he had crawled into the same courtyard. He's laying over there dying. I'm laying over here thinking I'm dying. And he was speaking, and I asked my interpreter, I was like, what is he saying? Like, he said, he's saying he's sorry. And he's saying he's sorry. He's like, we don't want to fight you. We're fighting you because you're here. And I thought to myself in that moment before I went unconscious and then woke up in a hospital a day later was, if I was at home in my neighborhood and some foreign army rolled through with tanks and helicopters and blew up my neighbor's house and killed half of my family and destroyed everything that I knew, would I pick up a weapon and go fight? Sure would. So to the average Iraqi, were they terrorists or were they just defending themselves? Hard questions. So I think the dehumanization is evil and it's powerful. And we're seeing it here. When Renee Good was killed, when Alex Pretty was killed, what were they called? Domestic terrorists. Not a critical care nurse working in the VA or a mother. They were labeled as terrorists. Any one of us, terrorists. Our United States government has called me a terrorist. It's laughable. Yeah. On September 3rd, when I protested in Congress at the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, and I stood up, and all I said, the United States government is complicit in a genocide, and you must honor your oath to the Constitution. And I held it up. And I got tackled and dragged out of there and arrested. And Ted Cruz said I was a terrorist. In uniform. So, the dehumanization is something that we must all combat and all fight and all realize that the rich, the elite, the powerful, and those that have things to hide, it sickens me that we're going to a war with a country because our administration is embarrassed by what's in the Epstein files. I said it.
And you addressed some of the dehumanization from the American lens, but you also touched on the viewing deck in Sderot that's overlooking Gaza. And for me, that's also one of the emblems of Israeli dehumanization of Palestinians. since the very first major assault on Gaza in 2008, and there's been very consistent genocide tourism that has been created in the Israeli society, where they take joy in taking their families and watching Gaza get blown to smithereens. And that was maybe the most clear example of seeing how dehumanized the Palestinians are in their eyes. Of course, there are daily examples of having to go through humiliation and checkpoints and usual apartheid, if you want to call it. But this was very sinister. The more I learned about the history of the Black community in this country and learned about lynchings and people who used to go and have picnics while somebody is being lynched, that was the closest corollary that I could see in modern history, is that you're taking your own children or your friends just to go watch Palestinians get killed. And that is something that, to your point, Palestinians have the right to defend themselves when they're being so dehumanized, so attacked. And how come we never entertain that? Why don't Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? Why is that not in the equation?
Ignorance, manipulation. The truth is, the right for Palestinians to defend themselves, even through armed struggle, is enshrined in the United Nations General Assembly, 1948. So, if I were to look at it purely from a logical sense, from an objective sense, I would say, okay, well, the United Nations, through General Assembly resolutions, have directed that Palestinians have the inherent right to resist their oppressor. There's only one country that is. Even through armed struggle. Okay. But then on one side, Israel might say, the UN. Okay. Well, it was the UN resolution of that same year that created your state. So does the UN matter or not? In one side of their mouth, the United States says, oh, the UN is saying it's a genocide? UN's dumb. Oh, hey, we've got a peace plan. Hey, UN, will you approve it? And then sure, here comes the UN Resolution 2803, the peace plan, and we all celebrate it. Oh, the peacemaker. Okay, well, I thought you just said the UN isn't viable and is dumb, but now it's not? It's manipulation. It's hypocrisy. In that no state has a right to exist. A people have a right to exist. That is the nature of the idea of statehood. People have a right to exist. Palestinians have a right to exist. Palestinians have the right to defend themselves. Palestinians and any people have the right to resist their oppressor. That is enshrined in international law. That is enshrined in the United Nations. That is enshrined in our Constitution. So why shouldn't it apply to everybody?
Thank you, Anthony. We say that people have the right to exist, and I do agree. And what Israel is doing is eradicating the ability of Palestinians to exist as a people. It is they're destroying the infrastructure, they're destroying the arable land, they're destroying any semblance of a potential future, and that's in Gaza. But we are also seeing a similar trend, maybe going on a slower pace as well in the West Bank. And the sum of the parts is a complete genocide and a genocidal intent. Yet we continue to give it cover through double speak, and I hate the word peace now, given how abused it is. How can we bring this clarity that you have into the eyes and ears of more people? You had to be on the ground. You had to face Amir and shake his hand, maybe for it to fully break through. Most people around us don't have the opportunity, thankfully, to have to be in Gaza during a genocide. But we have a moral responsibility to help them see what you are seeing, what you saw, and help them have that clarity. So how can we do better when the government is doing everything it can to tell a very false narrative?
I think that it's human nature to look at a situation, and the analogy that I like to share is that, and they teach this in AA, in that acknowledging a fact is intellectual, accepting it is emotional. And only until there's acceptance can you move forward in a healthy way. So in this situation, there are facts. Is there a ceasefire? No. That's a fact. No, there is not. But there are many that won't accept that. Because to accept, that's an emotional investment. Because you're acknowledging wrong. You're accepting responsibility. Many of our lawmakers, and I say this from deep experience, not from I heard. Since I have been home from Gaza, since July of last year, every month I spend a week in Washington, D.C. I'm not from there. I travel. I travel up there from Raleigh, North Carolina. Get in my truck, pack some sandwiches in the truck, and drive up there. Sleep in my truck over the weekend if I have to. I go up there 1 week out of every month to walk the halls of Congress and knock on doors and ask them hard questions. Congressman so-and-so, Representative so-and-so, or Senator so-and-so. House Resolution 3565, Block the Bombs, states that the United States should no longer provide offensive weapons to Israel. Why haven't you signed on to it? Thought we were in a ceasefire. Why does one side who gets all US support need offensive weapons in a ceasefire? Well, it's complicated. And that's the answer I get from the majority of our Congress. There's a small percentage, your Thomas Masseys, your Marjorie Taylor Greenes towards the end, your Van Hollens, your Sanders, that will say, yeah, we're trying to do more. We're trying. And then you have some on the far fringe, your Randy Fines, your Tom Cottons, that say, it won't end until every Palestinian's dead. We have congressmen that say that. They're all Hamas. Israel will continue what they do, and we support it. But then the majority of Congress, which is just as dangerous, oh, it's complicated. It's complicated. What do you mean it's complicated? Explain to me why it's complicated. Why? And then usually while I'm sitting there talking to them, I'll go to their congressional webpage as we're sitting there talking, and I'll look up who pays for their campaigns. And that answers all my questions. It's not complicated. You are compromised. This is not complicated. There should be no gray area on some of these issues. There should be no question of yes or no. It violates our own laws to provide Israel with what we're providing them. Yet we do it. Our president, if you want to say, oh, the president brokered a peace deal. Okay, well, if you believe that, then why isn't it being followed? By his own Congress. If I'm the president and I say, ceasefire, uphold it, and I'm the Congress and I say, oh, we're going to keep giving them weapons, though. No, there's a ceasefire. Stop that. But furthermore, do you know how many billions it costs us? I mean, I'd really like to see an investment in America. Healthcare, education, our freeways, our infrastructure, communities. I'd love to see that before $20 billion in 6 months being sent to drop bombs on women and children. I mean, does that have to be a political position? No, it shouldn't. Not if you're in the US Congress. I mean, when I walk the halls of Congress and I see Israel first, or a congressman say Israel first, it's scary. Insert whatever other country first. Why? You're an American. You're an American congressman. Why do you have dual citizenship? I don't know.
We'll do Q&A with the audience maybe in a few more minutes. We'll just get back. Just hold on to that thought.
My question list is growing, so.
Okay. Can you educate us a little bit about the Leahy law and how we are in violation of it, very likely? And is there anything that can be done to invoke holding ourselves accountable to something that is very clear cut, supposedly?
So the Leahy law is upheld through what's called Leahy vetting. It's a process. Throughout my special forces career, I was deeply involved in Leahy vetting because let's say I was tasked to go to Malaysia and train with the Malaysian Special Operations. I, as the commander of the Special Forces detachment going to train them, have the legal responsibility. It would fall on me if I went and trained people that were considered war criminals. So what I would have to do is I'd have to coordinate with the unit that I'm going to train with and say, hey, unit, I need a roster. I need a list of all the names that we're going to train with. I then send it to the State Department. The State Department has a database that they do for Leahy vetting specifically because it's a law. And in that Leahy vetting, anyone on that list that were to come up as a person of interest or a person of concern for having been involved in war crimes, imagine, like if they had been, if you're going to Cambodia and one of the units you're training with was once under the Khmer Rouge and fought under Pol Pot, you'd probably not want to train that unit. So you go through the Leahy vetting. And then if it's cleared, you train with that unit, but you still maintain awareness of what they may be using that training for. And if that doesn't pass Leahy vetting, it is then incumbent upon you as the commander to say, by law, I cannot train. Sir, we can't train with this unit. It violates, here's the Leahy conditions, it violates that. We can't train with them. Okay. That's how the Leahy vetting to uphold the Leahy law works. And I can tell you that the IDF, the Mossad, Shin Bet, the Ministry of Interior Security, their gendarmerie police force, none of them pass Leahy vetting. So why do we keep training with them? Because our Congress passed an exception to the law that Israel is not beholden to Leahy vetting. Interesting. That doesn't hold true for any other country in the world. No other country in the world, not even our closest allies. If I go to train with the Canadian Special Forces, guess what? I have to do Leahy vetting. Fact. I've done it. We trained with the Canadian SOF before we deployed to Afghanistan. We had to Leahy vet them. Israel, there's an exception in the law. Israel is not beholden to Leahy vetting.
And that's, in a sense, amazing how we are willing to give up a lot of what we consider American, the American essence of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, American law. We're putting all of that aside just to be able to continue to support Israel. We've seen what was done to college campuses with the encampments. We've seen a lot of repression of anyone that is speaking up in support of Palestinian human rights. And it's very clear now that freedom of speech and expression and freedom of the press are all selective. There's a red line, apparently, when you start to get towards Israel. And how can that we as Americans also make sense of a lot of these red lines that seem to touch on what to many people is their essence of their American identity? They feel very strongly about these amendments. That is what makes Americans proud of who they are. But yet we're openly, or our government rather, is openly telling everybody that you can have those except when it comes to Israel, or except when you want to support Palestinians. There's a strong Palestinian exception that's superseding everything that America supposedly stands for in the eyes of all of us. And where do we go from there as American people? How can we believe in the contradiction?
Well, we should not accept and believe in the contradiction. Right now, as an American citizen, if I went onto social media and said bad things about any other country in this world, no one would care. If I say one bad thing about Israel, I have the FBI knocking on my door. I mean, that's just the truth. So when it shouldn't, like, when you look at who's behind what's happening, you know who jumped on the bandwagon in Project Sunrise for the rebuilding of Gaza? Halliburton, you heard of them?
Mm.
Kellogg Brown and Root, you heard of them?
Mm.
Paramilitary groups, UG Solutions, it's just the grandchild of Blackwater. All the same people doing all the same dirty games. So when I look at something, it's like, oh, wow, we don't Leahy vet for this specific country because this specific country bribes this particular lawmaker. Oh, that's shocking. It shouldn't be. It's horrible and we shouldn't put up with it. But the facts and the evidence are so apparent. Oh, why? Why do they do that? When I go to a congressman and I sit there and I hear him, it's complicated. Well, why, Madam Congressman, is it complicated? Why is it complicated can you say to me as a fellow American that we stand against bombing children? Can you just say that? Well, it's complicated.
Mhm.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, is it complicated because a certain organization gives you $1.2 million for your campaign every year? So I say this in terms of a characterization of the whole of society of America right now. Not anybody particularly sitting in this room or a particular community. America. We don't care. That's the fact. We don't care enough. We don't. And until we care enough, nothing's going to change. If you've heard of the analogy, the frog in the boiling water, right? You place the frog into the cool water, you set it on the flame, it heats up slowly, and before you know it, it's boiling and the frog is dead. We are that frog, and the water is rolling. It's about to boil. And we're either going to wake up and do something about it or we're not. But I'm telling you, after this weekend, things in this country are going to change. When an American aircraft carrier is sunk in the Strait of Hormuz and 5,000 American sailors are dead, we're going to wake up. Because we're this close. Because the people leading us down that road have no clue. Because we see the Iranians as, oh, they'll never be as good as us. Not to find out. It's scary. So, democracy is only as good as the people that exercise it. I believe that when when Benjamin Franklin walked out of Constitutional Hall and he was asked, "What do we have, sir?" And he said, "A republic if you can keep it." Right now, we're in the test of whether or not we're going to keep it. Our forefathers, the founders of our nation warned us against some pretty clear-cut things, tyranny. It's why our Constitution and the oath that any officer in government, military or Congress, the oath you take is to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They put that in there for a reason. The two-party system will be our downfall. Washington said that, our first president. And what did Eisenhower say? The Supreme Allied Commander who then became the president, and his parting words in his presidential address, what did he warn the nation of? The military-industrial complex. And here we are. It's like we walk past every warning label. Wet floor, don't walk here. Really, don't walk here. You'll fall. Oh, man, I wish somebody told me something. And we told you. So, as a nation, collectively, until we wake up enough to care, there won't be change. I'm not going to lie to you and say that, the statistics show it. To the average American, having to work a job or multiple jobs to put food on the table, worrying about paying rent or paying a mortgage, worrying about affording healthcare or Medicare Plan A or Plan B or Plan C. I can't even figure that stuff out. It's crazy. How to pay for the next month's bills. Do you really have time to care about Palestine? For most, the answer is no. But that's intentional. That's intentional. Because you know who has universal health care? Israel. Who pays for it? We do. You know, has international stabilized housing payments and rents? Israel. And who pays for it? We do. You know who has guaranteed pension and Social Security? Israel. We pay for it. They should. So when you think about I once said to someone, man, universal health care, housing, equal pay, those will be great things. Oh, you're a socialist.
Mhm.
Oh, well then why is it then every military recruiter uses those three things to get someone to join the military? Pay your housing, pay for your health care, and you'll get equal pay. Sign on the dotted line. That doesn't sound very socialist to me. It sounds like a good thing. So yeah, when I ask somebody, I'm like, oh, it's socialism, then I guess our military is socialist. No. That's what every recruiter says to get someone to join the military. I've never seen a poster that says, join us so you can go die. The poster says, education, housing, good pay. Okay, well, there it is. That's valuable in a society. So the fact that when you look at Israel, they have universal healthcare, universal education, equal pay, subsidized housing, pension guaranteed. They have it, and we pay for it. And that's a fact. You can look. You can research these things. That is a fact. And we also have a standing memorandum of understanding, MOU, with the Israeli Ministry of Defense that every year, on time or else, we give them $3.9 billion at the beginning of every fiscal year. So y'all aware the fiscal year runs from October to the end of September, calendar years January to January. What was happening this October in our country? Remember? It's the longest one we've had. While our government was shut down, we still transferred the 3.9 billion on the 31st of September. Or else. So as we were considering cutting SNAP and WIC and socialized programs here, because it's woke, we were sending $3.9 billion to Israel to drop bombs on starving children.
I hope that one day we'll realize that if we cannot draw the line at genocide, then democracy is completely meaningless.
Where do you draw the line?
We have to answer for ourselves because there's a lot riding on what we're allowing ourselves to do, and very openly. And I think continuing to do this blind support for Israel is going to continue to worsen the sentiment towards Americans and America globally. Because the world sees and people see, and especially in the age of social media and connectivity, it's hard to hide the facts as it used to be in the past. And now the entire global community sees very clearly. And do we not realize that we're walking ourselves off a cliff as far as the global sentiment towards us? I think Israel already has walked itself off the cliff, and they're on life support because of the 3.9 billion and then some that we're giving them. But when do we wake up? How can we wake up in this country? And after this, we'll open up for audience Q&A.
Well, I don't think that we're blindly supporting Israel. Members of our Congress and our government aren't blind to what they're doing. The question we have to ask is why? And I take what the individual says at face value and that they're telling us the truth. Ted Cruz, a senator in our US Congress, said that he ran for Congress to support Israel. Those are the words that came out of his mouth, unaltered, unedited. Lindsey Graham, another senator, every 2 weeks he's in Israel. He hasn't even spent that much time in South Carolina, and he lives there. He goes to Israel every 2 weeks to visit. Why? If If we had a congressman who every 2 weeks went to China, or who said, I ran for Congress to put China first. Oh my God, we would lose it. Off with his head. Get him out of here. Traitor. Why isn't it the case for Israel? I don't know, because that's not a decision that I would make. So for those that make the decision, I can only ask myself, why? Well, maybe it's because Ted Cruz is Jewish. Nope. Maybe he's Israeli. Nope. So then what is it? Money. Money and power. Oh, surely it can't be that. No, it can be. It absolutely can be. And the thing is, when you have a sitting US congressman, a representative for the Florida 6th district, say out of his mouth, dogs are more valuable than Muslims. Randy Fine just said it 2 days ago. He said it out of his mouth. So I would offer to you that if any congressman in our United States Congress, senator or House, said dogs are more valuable than Jews, my God, they'd be skinned alive. But this congressman said dogs are more valuable than Muslims. And you know what the consequences were? Nothing. In fact, his base likes it. So part of it is we have to look at ourselves as a society and a culture and who we are. I don't believe that that's the mindset of most Americans, but it is the mindset of some. And at what point is the majority going to rise up and say, that's not us? That's not who we are. Because right now, if Gaza is a test, we are failing. And the consequences of failing that test are what we see coming right to our streets. I never thought I'd live to see the day in our United States of America where a US citizen was shot in the face by a federal agent and then called a B by that same officer as she died. Never would I have thought that. Never in my life. So it's concerning, and it's something that we have to look at ourselves, and it's almost like we're coming into that same period of change as in during the Jim Crow era and civil rights. A lot of people think it's okay to have segregation and that a Black American is only worth 3/5 of a man, or a woman doesn't have the right to vote. We were at that point in our country. And I think that we're now coming to a point again to say, does humanity matter? Do laws matter? Do values matter? Because if they don't, then what takes its place? Money, power. And that's a scary world. That is a scary world. And what I would tell anybody, it doesn't matter if you're white, brown, Black, Asian, Eskimo, Native American, if you're Catholic, Jewish, Wiccan, doesn't matter your religion, your ethnicity, your race, or color. Just because those that are in power now enjoy that benefit doesn't mean they'll always be in power. So for anybody that thinks now, it doesn't affect me. Doesn't affect me. It will one day. It will one day. And I feel like all of those things are colliding. Look at Well, we've been fighting war for the last 25 years. China has been beefing up their economy. China's economy is scary. Scary in terms of like they're already going into quantum computing. It's crazy. So I think we as Americans have to stand up for who we are as people, or we don't. I mean, that's where I see it.
Thank you so much. Let's a round of applause. This was incredible. Deborah, you have the mic for. So audience Q&A, will pass an extra mic. There's a couple in the back.
Thank you, Anthony. My name is Sam, a Palestinian, and I've been following your testimonies for quite some time. It means a lot that you took, that you're doing this, not just today, but over the last year. One thing that stood out to me in one of your testimonies was how attacked you were by folks that you actually risked your life to protect. So I've seen some of those interviews where, it was an IDF soldier, IOF soldier, who's or former soldier who's trying to smear you with your impeccable record. And I'm sitting there as a Palestinian thinking, so happy that this American veteran has had this experience in a way of shed light on the situation. And it's so ironic that the man who's benefiting from the American lives lost on their walk or otherwise is actually the one who's attacking him. And I was wondering if with everything that you've been through, I'm wondering if you reflected on this and how it made you feel at that time.
Well, when I first came home from Gaza, I thought that what I had to say to members of Congress would be shocking. They'd be like, oh my God. Or that it was some new revelation. And I was ignorant and wrong, because when I went to Congress and told them, not one congressman that I spoke to was like, oh my God. They were all, we know. We know. Yes, it's a genocide. No, it's not a genocide. We're not sure what it is. It's complicated. But no one said, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so you've known. And then the attacks came. And then I asked myself, why would anybody attack someone for simply calling out and saying that a genocide is wrong? Why would anybody hate someone for that? And then you look at the WHO, and you're like, okay. But yeah, when I retired from the military, having served 25 years, my entire adult life, I joined at 17, I wasn't even old enough to vote yet. My entire adult life and served, and looking back on it, and the attack against my military service was an attempt to shut me up, in thinking that, oh, well, I don't want to tarnish my military reputation, so I'm not going to speak out anymore. And I got to a point where I said, you know what? That's not why I served. I served to do exactly what I'm doing now, to serve our nation, to stand with Americans, not a foreign government. And those attacks may come in different ways. And I had to ask, I saw it this way, is that I am blessed and I am fortunate to be at a point in my life to where I don't need more friends. The friends I have are friends I've had for life. They'll never turn their back on me. I've been married for 18 years. When I come home, my dog is still going to jump up and lick me because I feed him. So it doesn't matter what someone says on TikTok. But more so to that, even if all those things were gone, being a Christian, raised in a Christian family, I'm Catholic, I know one thing to be true about this world is that we all die. They say that, well, you have to pay taxes and dad, well, you don't, a lot of people don't pay, Trump doesn't pay taxes. So dying is what we all do at the end. And whatever happens after that, I believe that I will stand before my maker. And when I stand before my maker and reconcile my life and the life that he gave me, and he looks at me and he says, let's look at your deeds on earth, Christian. I gave you a mind. Why didn't you think for yourself? I gave you eyes to see, yet you ignored it. I gave you a heart to feel, and you didn't. I gave you a conscience to know right and wrong, and you chose wrong. Why? Why, my child? Well, I was afraid of what they would say on Instagram. I was afraid of what they'd say on social media. I was afraid of what people would think. That's not going to be me when that day comes. It'll be, you spoke the truth of what you saw. Because last time I checked, not one of us leaves this world alive, and not one of us leaves with our social media following or what's in our bank account or how many friends we have. Those are all temporary things. So them smearing me, it didn't really, to me, it just made what they were trying to hide more obvious. You know, because I mean, at one point they were like, none of our distribution sites is there ever any shooting. And in their interview of them saying it, there's machine gun fire in the background. There was one of those interviews with the guy, one of these influencers they sent. And he was like, I'm here at the GHF site and I'm here to watch the distribution. And I'm here to tell you that what this Aguilar guy is saying is wrong. And there's in the background, people are like, what's that sound? Idiot. So yeah, I mean, you can't, you know, when I was in Gaza, Huckabee and Witkoff came to visit. And as they're sitting there talking to the GHF head, Johnny Moore, he's explaining to them how these sites are safe and how there's never any shooting at the distribution sites. And as we're sitting there talking to him, there is machine gun fire and bullets flying overhead and artillery rounds landing next to the site. And these two, Huckabee and Witkoff, great, yeah, this is awesome. I'm like, it's like, what is wrong with you? It's evil. It's evil. But I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes. So it's not something that I will back down from or shy away from in the truth. And any attempts to smear me, I'm not what's important in this. I will sacrifice myself for the voice, stand with humanity.
You call into service. You call into service notice the lack of gratitude that you experienced specifically by Israelis who, again, American service members, the risk of lives for that. That noticed by people who serve with and other members of the military.
Yeah, I think people are, there's still the vast majority of the US military that stand firm on the belief that, hey, what Israel is doing in Gaza is wrong. However, they're still our most important ally and we need them. And I believe that same thing until I saw the truth. And of my colleagues that I have served with, that I actually served with, as in the same organization, in the same unit together, not one of them has said anything negative to me at all. They've all said, thank you for saying what we can't. So the only people that have smeared me are people that I've never even met in my life. So it's like, It's like graffiti on the bathroom stall of a dive bar. Doesn't matter. Don't even know who wrote it. And if I took it personally, I'd be an idiot. So I'm a lot of things, but I don't think I'm an idiot.
Given what you know and what you've mentioned to us, what would be, like, what's your advice, or what can you tell us in terms of how we can, protect ourselves in terms of what's happening in our own country, what's happening to our neighbors and our communities, and what else can we do as individuals to help push and share this information that is unfortunately being extremely censored, and or, or that's just, people are getting scared to say things, they don't want to lose their jobs. Like, what's something that you can tell me where I can walk out of here feeling at least a little more confident or stronger to not only protect myself and people I know, but also to push and share all this information that I shared with us, and also just simply the truth.
We're fortunate to live in a world where information is so readily available and the ability to communicate is so instant. We take it for granted. What I would suggest, there's what I do every day that I wake up on my little list of things to do. Brush teeth, someday, not every day. I'm joking, every day. Brush your teeth, whatever. Send an email to my congressman, my senators, and my district rep. Doesn't take very much time. I take it a step further. I go to DC once a week out of every month to actually knock on doors and follow up face to face. Hey, Congressman so-and-so, I sent you this email. I got your reply that said, thank you, we take your matters seriously. You haven't addressed my matters. Oh, well, that's an automatic response. Oh, it is? Well, now I'm here. So what's your response? Oh, well, it's complicated. Okay, well, I'll be back next month and I expect a follow-up. What we all have to remember is that Congress works for us. They work for us. We pay their paycheck, we pay their salary, we put them in office, they work for us. The Capitol is the people's house. State Capitol is the people's house. Exercise those rights. Every day, first of all, what I would say, you could start tomorrow. Go online and type in, who is my U.S. congressional representative to my district? How many of you know that right now, who that person is? Not many. Right? Guilty. Guilty until recently, right? Never. We take it for granted. Go home and look up, who is my U.S. congressional representative to my district? What district am I in? Write that down. Who are my 2 state senators? Write those down. And then go to their website. Oh, who funds their campaigns? Oh, animal rights groups, AIPAC. Oh, interesting. Okay. That takes 10 minutes to do that. And then under a House resolution, for me, I would offer you HR 3565, block the bombs. That's a great one to get behind. That's still sitting between that gap of, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill legislation, Schoolhouse Rocks. Remember that? Going to become a law one day. Because not enough congressmen hear from their constituents to say, hey, why aren't you backing this? Can you imagine? If everybody that tuned in to the Super Bowl would take 5 minutes out of their day to write their congressman, man, imagine how much more our voice would be heard. It's easy. It's easy to write to your members of Congress, or to go see your members of Congress, or to get involved in things, or in the community for community programs to educate the community on things. There's so many things we can do to where in our country, as we step ever closer to authoritarianism, we're not there yet, but we're getting close. We can still assemble, we can still meet, we can still educate, we can still talk, we can still socialize, we can still communicate. So we need to use that. So, that's one thing that I do, that I just, every morning I wake up, I have their emails already saved in my Gmail. It pops up because I've, emailed them so many times, and I just write, "Good morning, Senator so-and-so." Sometimes they respond. So you gotta, if you can just imagine, if hundreds of thousands of people did that, they would listen and they would pay attention. But a lot of the congressmen that currently serve in the Senate and the House, they're not serving us. So we only have ourselves to blame for that.
I'll take that to also amplify a campaign some of our community members are leading, which is Taxpayers Against Genocide.
Yep.
Voters against billions. So you should take as many of these pledges as possible. You can collect some material here, but our money talks. I think how we spend our money, who we boycott, that makes a difference. Who we vote for, making sure our friends and families are voting for the right people, that will make a difference. And then be in community with people who are alike. Don't be alone. When we're alone, we will be afraid of what can happen. Find groups that can give you the support, can give you that sense of community and the same things that you believe in. And I think we're coming up on time, so one more round of applause. That was a beautiful session.
Thank you. Thank all of you for welcoming me to your community. Yes.
Just wanted to make one more announcement. I just didn't know you'd say that.
Yeah.
I'll make it real fast.
Go ahead.
So, I grew up in San Carlos, and I'm just so grateful that somebody told me that this was happening today. And there's an organization, I have little flyers for them that shows what was Gaza before and what is, it's not even updated. It's showing what Gaza is now, sort of. And there's a group that did a presentation last night that Dina and yourself was over in Berkeley.
Yep.
And the organization who made these cars is by the same group, called North Sevilla, and the website is on. But it'd be so fantastic if you're interested, because I'm so crazy, I've never done it before. If you're interested, if you want to give your name or to contact the group, because God willing, it's been updated. How do you like that? Because their little group just a couple of weeks ago decided that now, because every month, every year they do stuff, and they collected $60,000. Last year, to give, I can't remember what, but 60,000, it went to somebody who are fighting for the Palestinians. And this, so this year, they want to focus on churches. And so here we are at church. And there's so many churches that are being attacked, targeted, because there's some way, come out speaking about what's going on, or they are Zionists. So either way, if we can get together in our own communities, and how great Palo Alto, and just work with this group or any other group that's doing something, to just try to educate the people that are there. Mom Donnie educated the people in New York City, you know, a big percentage of the people being Jewish, but they heard the truth and then they voted for him. And that's, I mean, the politicians know the churches have people who vote. And they talk to each other. And in that letter, and it was wonderful that you get responses, but that's only because you're saying, when we call or write, unless we specifically say, we'd be so grateful if you reply. They just brush us off like dead flies. So anyway, if you have any questions, it would just be a fantastic thing. That's what the churches are there for, and we need to go to the churches, and this group is organizing. I'm sorry, too much.
No, thank you. And
Well, I did want to mention that this church is very active, so please, a round of applause for Tom.
yeah, thank you, Pastor Tom. Okay, and with that, we can wrap. Thank you to all the volunteers who helped make this happen. And once
Thank
again,
all of you. Thank you.
pleasure to have Anthony with us.